Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of Griot's Garage YouTube Live. I'm Nick.
I'm Sam.
And I'm Stevie.
And we are here to talk about basic polishing. It's as good a day as any other to talk about that topic.
Of course.
And we do this annually because, as we know, we've got new customers and do this more frequently. We're going to make believers out of more hand polishers and or non-polishers.
Yep. Yeah, we just had our first real rainy fall day, which is kind of the start of at least the time I like to spend in the garage polishing.
Yeah, no, and in particular, you and I have been polishing quite a lot recently because we're gearing up to sell a couple rigs and want to give the next owners a shiny paint system. So we've got a lot to cover today, but just in case you have seen this before, we're hoping that you learned something new from our basic polishing lives that we have done in the past. Those do exist on our YouTube channel, so if you haven't checked those out, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you've seen the basic polishing, we've also done advanced polishing seminars on the YouTube channel as well, so you can skip that. We'd love to have you here and hang out because you have access to us. So as always, ask questions. Participate in the live and let us know if it's your first time here. We are doing giveaways today, as we always do, for great questions and great participation.
Yeah, these basic polishing episodes are always question heavy, so if we don't get to your question during the live, we'll do our follow-up No Questions Left Behind later this week, so make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss that. If your question doesn't get answered today, we will definitely get to it there.
Yep, that's a great thing we've added on because of your guys' crazy participation. So we love you all. We love doing this, and this is a topic that we could talk about for 8 hours straight.
Yeah.
In fact, we generally do when we go to an event. We can't teach you everything. At some point, again, you have to jump in and try it. One of the big things today, we are going to be giving away a 2-step polishing kit for our giveaway winners. And again, if your question doesn't get answered, and we address it in the No Questions Left Behind, we do giveaways for that as well. Further motivation to subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss that. That comes out this Friday. So our 2-step polish and wax kit is the giveaway. So if you're shine from the investment, you have a chance to win one today.
Yeah, sweet giveaway, especially if you're just getting started out with polishing or if you've been doing it for a while. There's some good stuff in there for you as well.
Yeah, so we're going to cover the basics. We're definitely going to do some demos with regards to actual results that are achievable, the difference between hand polishing, the different types of polishers, and kind of break down some of the definitions and terms as we show you things. But we do have some housekeeping to take care of. We always talk about our events. If you guys haven't been to an event that we're present at, it's a great way to further the interaction that we offer via this platform, get some questions answered, get some good deals. So this month, we are going to be out on the Northeast in Warwick, Rhode Island, doing Oktoberfest Forever. That's from September 27th to the 30th. So our events crew will be out there, and Oktoberfest probably has something to do with German cars. So, German car fan, go right after.
Yeah, those types of events are always fun. And then we have Good Guys 30th Summit Racing Lone Star Nationals, September 29th through October 1st at Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth. I worked that one a few years ago. That's a pretty sweet Good Guys event down there at the Speedway, right there on the, in the infield, in the middle of the track. So it's a pretty fun place to have a car show.
Yeah, I like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it's probably tolerable temperatures.
Yeah, this time of year.
At this point in time, so it's actually, it's funny,
80s.
We're getting out of like the 6 good days of weather we have all summer and putting our cars away, and you guys are just like, thank God we can come out.
Yeah.
And then we do have our Indy Caffeine and Gasoline and Customer Appreciation Sale. I know I saw Speed and Shine TV. I know you're out there in Indy, so we're going to be doing that at our warehouse and manufacturing facility. That is October 21st at the Griot's Garage, Plainfield Distribution and Manufacturing Center. So you can go see all the employees that make the juice, ship you your products, and say thank you to them and have a good time at our facility there.
Yeah, I think we extended our 20% off liquid sale.
Well, we are giving these guys early access to it. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Just for you guys, use code SMLDH to get 20% off all of the liquid car care on our website. So great time to resupply all of those car care products that you used up over the spring and summer months and get ready for going into fall and winter maintenance. Again, that's 20% off liquid car care. Code SMLDH ends October 3rd. So you've got a little bit of time, but don't wait.
Hopefully we inspire you to do something and you can get some of the abrasives that we're talking about in this polishing seminar.
Yeah.
So again, we started that early for you all. We always want to throw something your way. And then as we mentioned, participation, good questions. First timers, we love giving away some products to you all. We have a little bit of discretion too. So if you already have a G9 polisher, for example, and we show you something with our small format tool that you like, and you win the giveaway, we'll let you pick too. So we'll fight the bean counters on your behalf, and we're gonna give away some free stuff. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We'd love for you to do that. It's a great way to interact with us and see all the fun we have as we travel the country, launch new products, and launch these sales. But you're here, thank you. We really appreciate you.
And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you get down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our content. We are getting a little more YouTube content other than the lives out there again, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, we got some fun track videos that we're going to be putting out pretty soon of some laps I did down at Laguna Seca this past August. So we got some footage in vintage Formula One car and vintage Can-Am car, and kind of take you along with me while I do some laps. Should be fun. So it's not just educational content. There is some cultural stuff on our YouTube channel as well.
Did you already mention the upcoming video?
No.
The taking delivery of a new car.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's coming out this upcoming Wednesday. So that's a pretty sweet video where we talk about the do's and don'ts of ordering, telling the dealer what to do or not do.
How to be the asshole that no dealership wants to deal with, and how to get your car in the condition you expect it in. But yeah, so you don't have to do polishing, which we're going to talk about today. So today the topic is basics, right? So we're going to, again, spend some time defining terms, types of tools, types of polishing. But categorically, polishing is, the improvement of your paint by, a finite and small amount of leveling. That is removing a little bit of a paint, yes, but with most of the defects that we deal with at this stage that aren't necessarily related to, say, refinishing or repainting a car, a lot of them are very minor and require very small amounts of polishing. That step is meant to improve consistency of look, texture over the painted materials of the car, and improve the look overall, right? So there are different types of polishing. There are different levels of intensities. There are different ways to approach it, and we're going to go through all of them. But the very first step in polishing, before you bust out pads, your favorite, hand tool, or your favorite trusted compound, the most critical step is going to be preparation.
Basics of basics.
Yeah, so ultimately, when we're talking about polishing, and once again, guys, we don't have a car here, but we're going to show you. We've got a fancy setup. Matt, you want to give me a little preview of what we're going to be looking at? So we've got our demo panel here, and we're going to be able to show you the results with high-intensity light when we section off portions of this panel. Going to be able to give you technique relative to how you guide the machine, the patterns that we recommend, pressure, and then ultimately show you results. So we'll work on our alignment here because we're a little off, and I'm sure you guys want to check out my shoes, but we're going to show you more of the black paint here, and that will be part of the demos that we do as this show progresses. So proper prep and assessing the surface. Let's start there.
Yeah. So number one is, of course, washing. Right? You want to get all of that loose grit and contaminant off the surface, and then you're going to jump into decontamination. So the washing part should be pretty obvious, whether it's a traditional wash or, if you're in the winter months and you can't take the car out and wash it with the hose, doing a good solid rinseless wash, and then jumping into your decontamination, which is almost always necessary. we've gone back and forth, and a lot of folks, which us included, will tell you that if there's no contamination present, you don't necessarily need to decontaminate. But I would say, 95% of the time, maybe even more than that.
I think it's higher than that. Yeah.
You're going to need to do decontamination, at least minimal decontamination, even on a brand new vehicle. It's a common question that we get, like, oh, I just bought this car, it's brand new. I don't think I need to decontaminate it. You might be surprised what's there, especially if it was transported to the dealer by rail or sitting in a rail yard, waiting to move to the dealership. You can get pretty aggressive types of contaminant like rail dust that can really mess up a polishing process and interfere with your results and how fast you get there if you don't get that stuff off ahead of time.
Well, and this is also to say, there are differences between what is considered new paint.
Yeah.
A car that is new to you but is old obviously is not really in the category we're talking about, right?
No.
It's probably going to have some defects. But a brand new car that you don't, listen to my tips relative to taking delivery of it, may be washed by the dealership. It's going to be one of 100+ cars they'll wash. They will have almost, 100% installed wash and do scratches due to dirty tools and just the volume that they've got to do. So, and the presumption on a brand new car from the factory is that paint would have been properly cured and can be polished safely, waxed safely without compromising off-gassing and that finish. So that's a pretty important note.
Yep.
The other thing to define too is scratch, right? Most people equate scratch to an angry girlfriend who took her keys and left her name in your door, or a cheater, or something really nasty. A scratch can have different levels of depth and intensity. And when we're talking about polishing, we are talking about micro marring or small scratching that has accumulated to the point that it is dulling your finish. And if you drive your car through a car wash tunnel even one time, you're going to get a heavy accumulation of fine scratches that may not be tangible, that would catch your fingernail, but they are robbing your finish of its full potential. And this is really the process in which you can improve that and make your car look brand new. We have many examples of original paint back here in our collection that's well loved, but over 20 years of the best processes, you're still going to get some accumulated micro marring and scratches. So whenever anybody says there's not a scratch on the car, I say you're a liar. Even our ISO Revolta, our perfect black paint, show car that has won multiple awards, it's got scratches. They aren't ones that are going to make us lose sleep, but they're ones that before a show we might spend 12 hours trying to cure.
Definitely.
After washing in decon, we're going to visually and tactilely assess the surface because, as we mentioned, scratches have different definitions to different people, and those large scratches that most people associate with a scratch are going to have a different level of, for lack of a better term, and maybe a made-up word, curability. I'm going to stick with that. So when you're looking at a paint surface, it's best to use sunlight or a high-intensity LED light like Sam has in his hands. And we're going to show you this paint surface really quick here, all right? Just so you can kind of see what we're talking about. So it looks black, right? To everybody through the screen right now, we're going to put some light on it and see what you guys can see.
Yeah, so there you're seeing, over there you've got a lot of swirl marks. You got some straight line scratches on this side. Most of this stuff is going to represent what you would see on a vehicle that's been washed at the dealer or taken through a wash tunnel a few times. Kind of your average swirl mark defects. So that's not what you want to see ideally, but it is relatively easy to remove with the processes that we're going to show you here in a couple demos coming up shortly.
I'll also say so what you're looking at, if we could get that shot back, is a pretty distorted reflection, right? You see the light, it's a clean, pointed light that gets pushed and distorted outwards with all of these. I like to compare it to, walking up to a pond that's flat glass and a perfect reflection of the sky, throwing a handful of pebbles into it, what's it going to do to that image of the sky? It's going to make it really shaky and inconsistent. That is essentially what is happening to your paint surface with all these little scratches. We can also look upwards into the reflection of the truss system. That's a aluminum box truck, and we've got some waviness to something that I know is straight. Excuse me, my finger's tracking. Right? Now, this little bend here, it looks a little wavy. That is light distortion that is created by an inconsistent surface. Now, we're doing this on black because black is the ultimate test. It's a beautiful paint when it's in great shape. And I would say from 5 feet or the untrained eye, you're going to look at this panel and say, it's black, man. What are you talking about? But with that focus light, you can really see how it robs the potential of that paint system. So it's not going to be as evident or obvious on lighter colored cars, but if you have a car that has metallic flake and your clear coat is damaged, and you remedy that, all of a sudden the flake pops, right?
Yep.
You've got some clarification to that that is going to drastically benefit the overall appearance of your car. I can say that it's more of a point of pride because every time I've turned in a car to a dealership without obvious or heavy swirl marks, they're not giving me any more money for that. But in a private party transaction or an auction setting or a concours, yes, these are things that can drastically benefit you.
Yeah, and if not more value in the car, it at least gives the buyer the warm and fuzzy feeling that you took good care of it.
Yeah.
And it's not, when the paint's not severely beat and in terrible condition.
Well, you look at the paint, you look at the interior, and you think, hey, if they took care of that, how did they change, how often did they change the oil? You probably have a pretty high level of confidence that the majority of those systems are addressed because they are less finesse, right? They're more black and white, time and mileage based, and if somebody's taking this much care of their paint system, great, got some confidence elsewhere.
Getting a lot of questions on prep, you guys. We're not gonna spend too much time on that today because we wanna get to the actual polishing part and those related demos. But we do have some great videos on paint decontamination and prep on our YouTube channel. I would say just search the Griot's Garage YouTube page for decontamination or paint clay, surface prep, things like that. No, you cannot use just a product like foaming surface prep for your entire decontamination step. You're almost always going to need some sort of mechanical decontamination. Although those chemical forms do help a lot in getting off organic contaminants and things like that, typically you're going to want to do some sort of mechanical with paint clay or a surface prep mitt or a synthetic clay pad and so on.
Yeah, and so we did the visual inspection. We saw some scratches and some high concentration that we didn't want to see. The other thing we mentioned is tactile, right? If you haven't decontaminated the car, and as you mentioned, there's chemical and mechanical, you're going to feel that the paint is not smooth. The risk when you're thinking about polishing with an unsmooth paint system, that lack of smoothness is most likely embedded contaminants that a polishing pad moving at 3,500 orbits per minute can pick up, right? And now transfer to the balance of your paint, creating J marks and pigtails and a lot of other undesirable things. So you want to be sure that the surface is neutral. Now this, and smooth. This painted panel that we use for demonstrations doesn't get a lot of exposure to the weather. It is 100% perfectly smooth.
Yeah,
and we did impart these defects so that we could show remedying them. But smoothness is the tactile establishment of, do I need to decon? Is it ready to polish after decon? So definitely want that. The other thing that we want to be sure to touch on, if you're uncertain, is measurement. You can definitely establish how much material, paint and or clear coat, is on your car using a paint thickness gauge. We do sell a very high quality tool. It's most effective when measuring paint on ferrous metals, not necessarily plastic panels, which will again kind of guide you relative to what's on the balance of the car. You can take measurements on flat spots, edges, and places that don't accumulate as much paint as paint dries. And that will give you a guide to understand, one, how much material do I have to work with, and two, how much am I removing in my polishing process to get the result that I want. And ultimately, this is going to be guided by what you want. What's the result you want? Do you want show car perfection? On a daily driver, maybe not. Do I want to restore it and get it perfect before I sell it? Sure. That's a different level of approach and a different amount of time. Do I have a light silver daily driven work truck that I want to make look like the best work truck in the lot? Yeah, you're going to take a different approach to that you're throwing 2x4s and making junk runs in, than your prized possession C2 1960-esque Corvette. All right, so the amount of time and your expected result paired with the material is going to allow the guidance of the process that you can take. And that will also guide the intensity of your pad and compound setup, which we will talk about those as we make our way through this topic overall.
Yeah, and like Nick said, measuring can be very beneficial to really learn the condition of the paint and what might be possible or risky. But if you're sticking with the processes that we're going to show you today in the more side of basic polishing, there's really very little risk involved. Even if you do have a thinner paint system, these methods and processes that we're going to show you are very safe and not a lot of risk involved.
Yeah, I will say that that's most critical on cars that have stated original paint, are very much antiquated. As a teenager, I detailed professionally, and I kept it pretty dang simple with regards to my approach. My prices were also related to that simplicity of approach, but the change, even with basic and very safe processes, is enough to satisfy a customer, and two, won't ever really get you in trouble. So that's a high level of certainty. The other thing to consider, obviously we talked about age of the car, but if you are able to know whether it's single stage or two-stage color clear, that is a great benefit. Most modern cars have clear coat. Clear coat is less expensive than pigmented paint. At some point they figured that out, that you could paint the car a certain color and save money by topping that color coat with clear and protect the color beneath it. Now, really, I think one of the last holdouts for clear coat was Porsche and some Japanese manufacturers that trickled into the early 90s. But if it's before 1990, it's probably safe to say that you might be working with a single stage system. The biggest test for that is testing a very inconspicuous area that is painted, and with a clean polishing pad or towel, apply some abrasive. If you rub it back and forth a little bit and get the color, the base color of the car, you're either have no clear coat left or dealing with a single stage system. If there's no color transfer, it is most likely that you have clear coat.
Yeah, I think the latest age vehicle I've seen with single stage is my Land Cruiser, which is a 97. And I had a friend with a 97 Land Cruiser that was green. His was clear coat. So they obviously probably have leftover black single stage that they were using up. Toyota's always been, excuse me, very efficient in their manufacturing processes. So sometimes you'll see that too, or you'll have two vehicles of the same year. It could be right at a month cutoff or something like that where they changed over. So don't always assume if you are in that pre-90 or early 90s age range and you're not quite sure yet.
Yeah. Hey, we've got some great questions coming in, so thank you, guys. We're going to have a lot to follow up with. Hopefully we're going to answer some of them. We've had some questions about, what's the one polisher I need to buy to get started. We're going to answer that question. And then very specific ones on types of paint and process and rules of thumb. So we'll definitely get to that. So we covered single versus color clear. And don't trust age alone, but you might want to do some internet sleuthing about your particular car and model year and color to find that out, because it definitely varies by manufacturer.
Yeah, or do the quick test like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Easy way to find out.
Okay, so one of the other things, once we've cleaned the car, established what type of paint we're dealing with, what type of defects, we know that it's decontamination free, we have some Hippocratic oaths of detailing. And those are, first, do no harm, very similar to the medical profession. And 2, you can always do more, you can't undo. So this is really going to guide your approach in terms of the least aggressive method as a way to say, hey, can I do less work, get the improvement that I'm seeking, leave as much finite material, paint, on the car as possible, and know that, again, my daily driver is going to look great. It's going to look better. We also complement that with a test area to say, hey, this is the process that I'm trying on a very small spot. I got the result I want. I'm going to do that to the entire car versus doing the entire car, being unhappy with the result, and then having to redo it. So those are some pretty key rules here.
And that really gets into what you mentioned earlier about what's your goals and objectives. What kind of a car is it? Is it your daily driver? Is it a garage queen or show vehicle? Prized possession, something that you want perfect. Personally, on daily drivers, I'm usually a believer in doing a little less because you're going to pick up defects here and there. You also want the material to be able to continue, polishing it and removing those defects that you're going to pick up. And then, of course, there's situations where you want it absolutely perfect. So that's really going to guide your process and determine how aggressive you may or may not need to go.
Yeah, and we always get a question about, like, how many times can I polish paint before I burn it or burn through the material? That's highly variable on the amount of material, the age of the paint. I can tell you a very low mileage Land Cruiser that we got in here, somebody in the sale prep had taken off too much material, and it was irrelevant at that point. They had done the burning, and they didn't care because they were going to be on to the next one. But with the tools and processes we're going to recommend, it is variable, yes, but a painted panel like this that we do a lot of demonstrations on, I mean, we can take the most aggressive approach and cover a single area, more than 100 times before we compromise the clear coat. That's not atypical, and obviously multiplies with a less and less aggressive result. Proper washing in between polishing sessions. There's absolutely no need, I can't imagine a need where you have a brand new car that you're going to have to polish 100 times in that car's lifetime. If you do, you're doing something wrong in the intermediary steps.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll probably make it through that clear eventually if you're doing it that often.
Okay, so we're gonna show you guys some demonstrations. One last element of before you get started polishing is taping. So if you've ever painted a room in your house and you thought, I don't need to paint, or I don't need to tape. Ask your wife how she feels about that after you've put green on your white ceiling. But it's the same concept with polishing a car. There are sensitive materials around painted materials that an abrasive will potentially harm or affect differently. So if this were a car with rubber gaskets around the edge, which is very common, say around a windshield on a hood, or an older car like my Lincoln with a big run of chrome. Chrome being even more sensitive and finite than the paint that's on that car. I'm going to tape it as a precautionary step. Do I like doing taping? No. Does it make my post cleanup easier? Yes. Does it also serve as a visual guide? Yes. So there are big benefits to taping, and we're going to kind of commit a faux pas. We don't like, as much as you may watch Instagram and see 50-50 reveals and tape lines, that's really poor practice.
On a car,
because it can encourage you to polish over that tape. The tape then gets hot, the paint swells, and you will never really be able to remedy that visual difference, and it's actually a physical difference because the adhesive in the tape has pulled the paint up off the body. Now it's not going to chip off, hopefully, but we don't recommend doing this on a painted surface for Instagram likes. All right, we have some competitors that do it unabashedly, and we frown upon that. But
you just create a hard to remove line sometimes too. So
for the purpose of showing you different results, we're going to do some taping. All right, so I'm going to tape this in different sections. Again, this isn't really ideal, but we're going to show you kind of the difference between polishing types. and some of the tools and approaches. So,
and a couple of you guys asked about taping and do I have to do it before basic polishing? Do you have to? Of course you don't have to, but you're probably going to pay for it if you do. So that was one of those lessons that I learned early on. You're going to spend the time up front, but it's going to save you time on the back end and prevent potential damage or headaches when you're done with the full car. So it's worth the $5 or $10 roll of tape and 30 to 40 minutes of your time.
Yeah, when I was prepping my Jeep for its final polish, I'm selling my Wagoneer, if you guys are familiar with that car. Have too many children at this point. But I went out in the garage and I spent about an hour taping. And I came back inside and I was like, how much polishing did you get done? I said, none, I just taped the car. And she's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And like, well, I taped the entire car. I taped every single spot in one go, and I got faster and faster. Yep. And then, I can go back out later that night and really attack polishing effectively without that cleanup. And then I don't want to chase the seams and get dried wax out of those seams.
Or polish.
Because I'm doing that with a toothpick and hating my life for about as much time as I would have taken to just tape the damn thing off.
Yeah, and then you're not trying to avoid edges while you are polishing, which speeds up the process. So it's better off to just get it done.
Yeah, so
don't avoid it.
Some surfaces that may be less sensitive would be glass, but glass is usually buffeted or bordered by a rubber gasket of some type, so we're taping the gasket off. Chrome is another one where, again, if you're going to run a spinning buffer into that chrome, it could not only let loose a body panel, but it could rub the chrome and create a thin spot, which if you've ever done that, it turns blue.
Or backing plate damage.
Or it goes to copper and looks terrible. Yeah, it could mess up your pad. So it's definitely kind of a guiding line and definitely can protect those sensitive materials so that you don't run the risk of damaging it. So is it necessary? No, but you better be damn careful. And we're going to go on record saying, whatever time we sign you up for in taping, we're going to save you on the back end.
Depends on the vehicle. Some take longer than others, but it's worth it either way.
Okay, so let's talk about the types of polishing. So we've got a couple different tools here.
Yeah.
We've got hand polishing, which is not limited to just this particular setup, but we've got kind of an applicator, something to grip on, and then a foam polishing pad. We're going to show you the effort. And I think we want one more pan just so we can show the condition of the paint again to show you what we're able to achieve by hand. And we will show you then that same result juxtaposed next to a machine and show you or talk about the benefits of that. Yeah. But ultimately, polishing can be done by hand, right? It is very labor intensive. It is a lot of exertion, a lot of pressure. Tennis elbow, if you've got sore shoulders, these are things that just aren't very fun.
Yeah, and your results are super limited compared to what you will accomplish with a good random orbital polisher as well.
Yeah.
I'd say you're really going to be limited to like light oxidation removal and very light swirl mark removal. And even then, when you're getting into swirl marks, you're really going to have to work at it. So it's I usually say, like, if you want to hand polish, go for it. But once you do a full car, you'll probably only do it once. Your time is worth more than the cost of an orbital and the amount of time that will save you and the results that will give you in comparison.
So we're just giving you kind of a quick reestablishing shot of the paint itself. Again, heavy, consistent swirls, a lot of light distortion. And then all the way over, we've got that consistently throughout. So we actually have some pretty clean paint over here, actually. So that I'm not going to worry about. I'm going to focus on this panel right here, and this is where we're going to show you hand, and then we'll come back over and show you machine, and probably get rid of those pretty quickly. So again, just a reestablishing shot with hand. One of the other things that you're going to find is most hand polishes and compounds are going to have larger size abrasives because they're asking the abrasive to do more work, which means that you're definitely going to be able to get the vast majority of your heavy swirl mark concentration out, but you may not cure the very small finite ones that'll start driving you nuts, because to do that you're going to need a finer polish, and you're either going to have to do a subsequent hand step with that finer polish, or you're simply not going to be able to achieve it with a compound that is designed for hand with such a large abrasive molecule within it. So we're going to pair this with complete compounds. So because of the concentration here, because complete compound has the capability to be used by hand, we're going to show you hand polishing.
You put another, just to, that way you're not doing,
cut it in half,
doing too much work. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Appreciate you.
Time. Keep these demos.
I need my elbows and shoulders. So right here we've got a fresh pad. This is our medium density orange foam pad. We will talk about foam densities and facings as we get through this education. But the first time I use a pad, I'm going to do a process that we call buttering. It's going to be an over application of the compound in order to lubricate the foam, and then every subsequent panel or space that I proceed to, I'm going to use a very small amount. So initially I'm trying to cover, in case you didn't know, our 16-ounce bottles, that top just simply slides up for a nice application of the product. Get a little shake going on, and then I've got this nice dome cap so I can work my way around the pad surface, and it doesn't have to be every inch, but with that dome top I can spread it out very evenly. So I've got a nice buttered pad here. Now, with hand polishing, we still encourage straight line motions. Swirl marks tend to accumulate or appear circular, but in reality, it's just a smorgasbord of scratches that have accumulated over time. But you can definitely create circular scratches if you're starting to do, Mr. Miyagi style. Less relevant with waxing, but with polishing, we're going to do straight line motions. So, simply going to apply the pad to the paint, and my pressure is really how much can you bear. Spread it out kind of lightly, and then go back and work it.
Straight line motions also helps you track your progress and make sure that you're not leaving little triangles between sections as you could if you were using circular motion. So
the other thing is
really the way to go.
You can see kind of my variation of pattern. Now, it's not so important with a very small area like this where I'm going to almost ensure even coverage. But on larger panels, if you're a beginner, this is just simply a way to show that you can replicate the result and touch everything the right way. It also helps track where you've gone and where you've been. So we call it a crosshatch. Not critical, in particular if you're more advanced and have a good memory, but if you're out in the garage drinking some sodas doing this work, crosshatch pattern might be a good process to follow.
Yeah, easy to track your passes, like you said, and it's also a great method for large flat surfaces. Sometimes, if you're working on a curvy surface, you may need to follow the body lines more, but you'll pick that up as you get more experience as well.
All right, now with a compound, its sole purpose is to remove scratches. That is the product, excess product still on the surface. There's no point to waiting. We want to wipe this off as fast as possible so that it is easy to remove. All of our polishes are very easy to wipe off, but we're just trying to expose the result immediately.
Yeah, even if you accidentally forget a spot, pretty much all of our polishes and creams, including the complete line, come out very easy.
So,
very easy.
In looking at this paint, I've definitely improved and or reduced the amount of swirls. As you guys can see up top on this section versus the clarity of the reflection here. What I am seeing with my critical eye is a slight bit of haze, or what looks like through the light is some grayness. That is going to be due to that larger abrasive, essentially doing what is called micro-marring. So if I'm insisting upon hand, I've got to step that down to a finer abrasive. Our complete polish fits that bill, but you're doing two steps. So
Looks like there's some deeper straight line marks left in there too.
There are definitely some deeper straight line marks. It's going to be a little harder to see those. But you can definitely see with that focus light that we're getting kind of consistent ripples that way, and that's really where I'm seeing them the most. But mostly still a little hazy, right? So I've got to clarify that further with hand polishing. Yeah. Now, hand polishing, it's great for an old car. If you're very traditional and want to do a safe approach, there's nothing safer than hand polishing, right? You really can't get in trouble so long as the surface is clean, but it is going to have minimal, or it will not be able to achieve the same results as a machine will. And you can see the amount of effort. I probably did about 10 passes over that surface to achieve that result.
Yep.
And I was using good arm pressure, right? I'm exerting myself, I'm pushing down as I, I'm tense, right? I'm trying to impart that polish into it. So that can be tiresome if you're thinking about an F-350 or a big car. This is
even a small car doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
You're going to wear yourself out.
It may be a great way with an original car that doesn't have a lot of paint, that doesn't need a lot of work to do it. It may be therapeutic. You may just like touching your car. Okay. However, we're definitely going to show you the benefits of machine polishing versus hand polishing very quickly here. All right, you want to?
Yeah, we can just use the same pad just so it's obvious that the playing field is level.
There you are, sir.
This is our G8 random orbital. So we're going to explain a little more detail about random orbitals right after this demo. I'm going to show you guys what the random orbit term means, but just to get this demo out of the way, put a little bit more product, still quite a bit left in it.
So that would be indicative of panel to panel, right?
Yep.
The pad is already saturated. Moving on to another space, just a small amount of product required as you move along.
Yeah, now, normally when I'm doing a big flat section, I would use a 5 or a 6 inch pad on a larger orbital, but just to indicate, level playing field, we'll use the same pad size here. I'm going to start out at speed 3, spread the polish over this small section real fast, and then crank it up to speed 4 or 5. Lock the trigger and speed it up to 5. And then we'll do fewer passes this time too. Oh, Nick, how many did you do? Probably
10.
10? Okay. So we'll do 5. So there was 1 pass. Going to 2 passes. So we usually define a pass as complete coverage of the section. So that was my 2nd pass. 3rd pass here. Still using that crosshatch pattern. 4th pass. And then 5th pass. Just nice slow arm speed. You don't want to move fast like you would hand polishing, or you're going to have to do more passes. And I'm using, a little bit of pressure there, not a ton. Always want to start with the pad on the surface and finish with the pad on the surface, letting it slow down to avoid sling. And then easy wipe off like Nick had.
Got a couple great questions coming in, so while you're showing the results, I'll definitely speak to them. Do you need this high intensity focused light? No, you definitely don't. Again, sunlight is a great judge, but I hate to do the whole car and then roll it out into the sun and be angry.
Yeah.
So focused high intensity light, even if it's not in this pen light, you've got a little shop light. Those are great ways to kind of judge the consistency of appearance of the paint before having to judge it, post-mortem in the sunlight. So,
yeah, I'd say you need some form of light.
Yeah.
Whether it be a nice LED pen light like this, or like Nick said, a standard magnetic light that you use for wrenching or whatever it may be. Having something to inspect the paint with in between is pretty essential. If you're doing it outside, usually you can kind of manipulate the sun, move it around with the different angles and whatnot that you're looking at the car. But even then, it can be handy to have some sort of a light to check your work.
And to be clear, the flashlight on your phone is not going to do it.
No, yeah, that's a great point, Stevie.
Not enough lumen output on that thing.
Yeah, it can give you kind of false hope. And, oh, that looks good. And then you get a brighter light on it or pull it out in the sun, like Nick said, and you're like, oh, okay.
Dang it.
Not quite there.
All right. So that's the hand polish section. Again, we've got that pretty obvious refraction with that light being distorted. And then you've got a little tape line that's original condition of the paint. So we've definitely improved it with hand polishing, no question.
And then coming up here, you can see it's much more clear. So that light reflection, if I can get my hand out of the way here, that light reflection has much more clarity to it.
And again, I think we'll reiterate that we're showing the differences here of original condition versus hand versus machine. Hand, again, perfectly acceptable. One of the biggest downsides of it, higher effort, more coverage to get what is obviously an inferior result if we're just judging by the clarity of the finish and the high intensity reflection. And you did 5 passes.
Yep.
With that machine versus 10 with that I did with the by hand, and we've easily got a better result there.
Yeah, so half the time, less than half the effort. Matt, if you go back to that overhead real quick, because that's showing it really well. So pay attention to right around the beam and how the light is, refracting off. Like Nick mentioned, you get those light flares. Those are defects that the light is highlighting. Ideally, you don't want to see that. Either that means there's haze or light swirls left and or product residue, which in this case it's definitely not residue. And then you come up across that line and there's no more of those light flares or light refraction. Now I can see with my eye here, there are some deeper scratches that were in this panel prior to today that I would just have to spend a little more time getting out. I don't think those are really coming through much on the overhead, but as far as the clarity and the overall finish, you can see kind of that hazy gray look that Nick was talking about and all those light flares into that nice, clear, crisp reflection and a much deeper, darker black finish.
Yeah. All right, so we've got some great questions that will parlay us into our next topic, and that is going to be, after the juxtaposition of hand versus machine, well, you might still be afraid of machine, right? Mm-hmm. And we can tell you that there are differences between machines, and again, some great techniques that will kind of help you start with a machine. So we're going to spend some time talking about that, and then definitely some less than advanced or less than basic questions coming through from our audience as we would expect. So thank you guys. But let's take some time, look at some of these questions because I want to give something away.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be teaching something. Do you want to take that Contribita question? Any fillers in the Griot's compounds or polishes? Yeah,
so Contribita asks, are there any fillers in any of the Griot's compounds or polishes? The short answer to that is no. Specifically the Boss line of products, from fast correcting cream to perfecting cream, those are all completely filler-free, body shop safe products.
What you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. Yeah, even if you were to, we did this a lot in testing of those products, you polish a panel, put a tape line down half, strip one half with a product like our Surface Prep Cleanser, you won't see a difference between the two sides. And that's really what you want in a true compound, something that isn't kind of tricking you into believing that you got a better finish than you really did. Our goal is always to remove defects completely and not just hide them. Although there are some situations where hiding can be beneficial. Products like finishing sealant, Boss finishing sealant, because that has waxes and sealants in it, those will always have a slight, kind of inherent filling nature to them. They're not going to hide, deep scratches or noticeable swirl marks, but they will make it harder to see things like haze or really, really fine, micro marring and that sort of thing, because they're going to create a darker appearance, especially in a dark finish like a black or dark blue, dark red, things like that. And that's really true to any sealant, wax, or all in one. They're all going to have a little bit of inherent filling nature. Now that's not to say we didn't specifically add any fillers to finishing sealant. It just has that inherent nature because of the sealants and waxes in there. Then when you get into complete compound and complete polish, complete compound is going to be just like Boss Fast correcting cream, and perfecting cream, whereas completely filler free. What you see is what you get. Complete polish, like Nick briefly mentioned earlier, does have a light filling capability to it, with the sense that we marketed or created these for hand and orbital use. If you're using it by hand, like you see there during our demo that we just did, there's a little bit of a little bit to be desired about that finish. So the polish is going to perfect it further, but the light filler in here is also going to help hide anything that's left behind.
It's very typical of hand applied products to contain fillers, in particular because you can't get to that 95 to 100% correction capability. So as Sam mentioned, they can't hide the deep stuff, but they'll fill in some of that hazing or micro marring that we saw with a large abrasive hand-applied compound. So categorically, we try to stay away from it. If it's an all-in-one product with a combination of a protection and abrasive step, it's essentially assumed that you have some filling qualities, even if they're not specific fillers. A lot of hand-specific products will have fillers to help hide their ultimately, not ineffectiveness, inability to get out the last little bit of Septs.
Yeah, a little plug for complete polish too. Because of that light filling ability, this can be a great secret weapon for like really, really soft paint, where it's even with a product that finishes down really fine, it can be hard to get that last 1 or 2%. Complete polish can help out with that.
Yeah, we've got some other great questions. One thing, I can't see exactly who asked it, but it is temperature related. So storage of chemicals. Ideally, we want our chemicals to be stored at room temperature. They have been freeze thaw tested. Really extreme conditions will challenge them, and they can separate in extremely high heat. The water that is less a part of the compounds and those emulsions, I've seen evaporate out of uninsulated garages in Arizona summers. And then freeze thaw can get the phases separated that won't remix. If that does happen to you, if it's incurable, you can call us and we'll replace that product. But ideally room temperature, and shelf life is anywhere between 2 and 5 years. Probably on the higher end of those, more complex oil water emulsions that are in our compounds.
Yeah.
So
fluctuations are what you really want to avoid.
Yeah, the abrasive's not going to break down. It's just the parts of it might fall out of phase and not come back together. So that's really the only shelf life concern with a lot of these more complex emulsions. As it relates to the temperature and direct sunlight or controlled conditions, ideally you could always do this in controlled conditions. However, I used to do a lot of my detailing outside. The biggest thing about abrading your paint with an orbital or by hand is that you're going to create friction. Friction generates temperature. The different types of machines generate different types of temperature. A little bit of temperature can accelerate your process, but if it's coming from the paint system or car up, it's almost always a bad idea to be working on a warm or hot panel, as it could encourage actual separation of the paint from the metal when heat is also introduced from the top down with a polisher, and then it can burn, right? So paint burns, in the high hundreds, if not close to 180 to 200 degrees. So your tools in a pad setup on a random orbital polisher are almost never going to generate that unless your paint system, and we did this outdoors, right, with the black Land Cruiser. I mean, it was easily 120 degrees with 20 minutes of direct sunlight.
Yeah, before putting an orbital on.
It's not a condition you want to start polishing in. So you definitely want that surface to be ideally cool to the touch. And we kind of talked through some direct sunlight strategies of switching to shaded side for both washing and polishing. we know not everybody has the garage mahal that we get to work in every day. So it is possible. I've done it successfully many times. Ideally, if you got to do it outside, skew to an earlier or later part of the day.
Yeah, do smaller sections.
Yeah.
That's another factor. It's just going to make it harder to wipe, product residue off and things like that. Even if you're not risking burning, you're going to have to be a little more diligent, a little faster, doing smaller sections and getting the product off quickly and things like that. So avoid it if you can. But like you said, we've all done it. It is possible. Just have to work quick and be a little more cautious.
Yeah, Eric Mazzola asks, are you saying some of these should not be used for a non-hand polish job? If so, can you be more specific? Eric, can you clarify that question for me?
I would
think might be speaking about some of the compounds.
Yeah, I think he's asking, should some of these not be used for like machine polishing? Answer to that is no. They can all be used for machine polishing, specifically the complete products, complete compound, complete polish were developed with both hand and machine polishing in mind.
Yeah.
So these can be used for either, but if you're gonna use something for hand, we recommend, I'm getting these backwards here, we recommend complete polish and complete compound. The Boss creams, Nick mentioned abrasive size. The Boss creams use a much more refined abrasive that is better for machine polishing than the complete line, but isn't gonna be as effective by hand. Could it still be used by hand in a pinch? Sure. But Boss system is really developed for specifically machine polishing, especially long throw orbital applications, which we'll talk about a little bit, whereas complete is hand or basic orbital applications. These aren't really recommended for long throw applications though. That's where the Boss line comes in.
All right, love you guys and your humor. Tug R says, coworker borrowed my G8 about a month ago. In your opinion, how aggressive does my passive aggressive Slack message need to be? Get your damn tool back.
Yeah.
Come on. I grew up in a garage where if a single socket went missing, I got a stern talking to.
Cardinal sin.
If it was a 10 millimeter, there was no punishment. If it was like a 14, then I had some answers. But
we all have those friends that borrow something and then they specifically wait for you to ask for it back. Otherwise, they'd probably keep it indefinitely.
Yeah, or they pawned it for something. So get that thing back. Those are great tools. And as we always say with all of our tools, they have a lifetime guarantee against defects. So if somebody is breaking it, or if he's afraid to return because he broke it, we'll take care of you. But then don't lend it to him again.
Definitely.
All right? Make him buy his own. Yeah. So let's see. What's next? Okay, let's talk about
rotary versus
beginner and types of polishers really quick, because we've kind of shown hand versus machine. We are big believers in machine polishers. I've been using one since I was a teenager. We go to a lot of hot rod shows where guys are like, no way I would ever use a machine. Machines burn paint. Well, this is, first of all, that is possible, right?
Yeah.
A machine can burn paint. In particular, we just talked about heat. If you were polishing on a hot panel with the safest tool on planet Earth, you can cause some damage, without a doubt. But there are two very specific types of tools that we want to talk you through as it relates to electrical machine polishers. This applies to pneumatic as well. So we're gonna get the cord and kind of show you close up. I got to find my camera here. So let's start with this one. So the tool that we recommend for beginners, and this is going to be size irrelevant right now, is a random orbital or dual action polisher. Now this is going to be hard to exaggerate with these smaller format tools, but dual action is what it says it is, and random orbital is almost repetitive, right? Random orbital speaks to the actual pattern of the tool, but dual action is a straight rotation of the pad itself and an oscillation off-center due to a counterbalance that is behind here. So we are going to see kind of a shudder off-center as the tool spins. Okay. Okay, as a tool spins, we are going to see it come off center. Now, this is an 8 millimeter offset, but you can see as I let it off how that kind of shudders around. So you've got a true direct rotation of the pad and an off-center motion of the actual counterbalance and backing plate. That is the dual action. What this does is it generates less temperature, it doesn't create a single point of contact, thus generating less heat, and is much safer for a beginner to use.
You can leave it if you want.
Next to that,
at the same time.
And this is the one where most of these hot rod guys have cut their teeth on these types of tools or fear these types of tools.
Story from them.
Because quite frankly, these were the tools that were in body shops and the only available technology until somebody was brilliant enough to adapt what is a wood sanding concept in dual action random orbitals, which is a low heat process. You don't want to generate too much heat when you're sanding down a very nice piece of wood. It was adapted to car polishing. So the counter to that is a rotary or direct drive polisher. Direct drive simply has a single rotation. You can see it just spins as opposed to spinning off center, right? We aren't seeing that pad or backing plate, even though you can hear it moving anywhere off center. Now this tends to have a steering motion to it, and it definitely takes a little bit more technique, but is great in the refinishing world where that temperature benefits the process in generating more temperature, cutting through sanding marks and more aggressive steps. The benefit of a rotary is it can get in smaller spaces because it doesn't move off center, and is definitely got a place in a professional's arsenal, in particular if you're using or wanting to do speed. Now, in reality, a refinishing process is going to require both of these tools. For you refining your finished car's paint system, you're probably only going to need dual action polishers until you find a need for rotary. We love a rotary tool for sure, but it's not the first tool you should get if you are just getting into polishing.
Put a mark on that pad on the rotary just so you can see it's spinning on a single axis. There's no orbiting or oscillating there versus the orbital where you're getting that dual action motion. It's rotating and it's orbiting.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is a rotary tool, I can't just free spin this. It's a gear driven rotation. I have to physically grab it and turn it. You can hear those gears moving. Whereas a random orbital has a free spin element to it. So it's a gear driven orbit, but a free spin rotation. And that's what gives you a lot of your safety, because when I put pressure on this, I can lean on it all I want. I'm going to burn my thumb, but I'm not going to be able to stop it. It's going to keep rotating, just as much. Whereas this, if I put pressure on it, it's going to stop rotating. It's still going to orbit, but that pad, that rotation is slowing down or stopping to prevent, heat generation.
Yeah, it's almost a built-in safety mechanism. It's also a guide to know whether or not you're getting the most efficiency out of your tool.
Yeah.
Right. If you're seeing that motion stall, it means you're probably pushing it into a spot where it's not very happy.
Yep.
So it's kind of like a, annoying driver aid, but at the same time, good technique can get you to avoid that. Now, we did have somebody point out, of course, forced rotation DA polisher. There's a very famous, excellent tool on the market, the Flex, was it 3401?
Yep.
That is gear driven, but it still mimics the pattern of a random orbital.
Yeah.
So free spinning versus gear driven. We do not have a gear driven random orbital. They are definitely very capable. They definitely have some safety built into them. There is that kind of steering and pull that requires a little bit more experience than a free spinning random orbital. So that is a tool that exists in the market. Without a doubt, there's a very good one in that Flex 3401. A lot of professionals love that, in particular because with a smaller stroke or throw, which we'll talk about next, you can get results that are more comparable to a longer throw tool. And so let's take some time to talk about that. So we've cleared up dual action, lower heat, definitely not a single point of contact. That lower heat creates some safety, and in particular, it's a great entry point.
Yeah.
Rotary, more direct contact, more heat generated, great for refinishing, great for tight spots, definitely more experienced user, and definitely a place for somebody that really is starting to have fun polishing. I know in that Jeep, I had tiny little 1/2-inch sections. I used a rotary tool with a 1-inch backing plate so I could fit in there. And with a non-wool foam pad, it's not generating nearly as much heat as a high friction natural fiber. So let's do G9 versus G15.
It's a dirty backing plate.
And then we'll talk about those throws. So right now we've got 2 more random orbital polishers. We sell 7 tools.
Yep.
5 of them are dual action random orbital polishers, and one is a true direct drive rotary, the GR3. And then our hybrid micro polisher is a combination tool where you can select whether you want dual action or direct drive. This thing is absolutely awesome. But if we're talking about how to get started, we're going to focus on the differences in terms of throw here. So Sam's going to mark up some pads, but for G9,
that's a 21.
21,
actually, but
okay.
It'll show the difference.
So
better.
in our polishing system, the numbers behind the actual polisher itself indicate that throw or oscillation off center. G9, 9 millimeter, pretty much been the industry standard, if not close to it. 8 millimeter is typically the industry standard, 5/16 inch throw. G21, 21 millimeter offset, much further throw off center. And that is pretty much an industry standard, complemented by a G15, 15 millimeter, the other step up in these long throw tools. Now, I'm going to run both of these tools at a low speed so you can kind of see how these patterns differentiate. Again, with that random orbital G9, you've still got that deliberate off-center motion. With the G21, you can see it goes much further. So, and it's kind of almost creating like this crazy effect on screen.
That's cool seeing them side by side like that.
Because this is throwing off center 12 more millimeters per counterbalance swing than the G9. Now, why the difference? And what would you start with if you were a beginner? Well, as you err on the side of caution with somebody else's car that you don't know a lot about, you might want to build yourself some margin for error, and random orbital is the best tool for that. However, if you're doing work and getting paid for your detailing, speed is important. So with that more exaggerated stroke, you get more friction, more temperature, which equates to a faster result and a more aggressive capability in this tool. Is this the first tool I would start with if I were a beginner? No. Could I very quickly advance to a point where this is the tool for me?
Yeah.
Without a doubt, and still have some margin for error. If I'm starting out and I've got one tool to buy, it is this tool, the G9, in particular because the size of the backing plate being either 6 inches or 5 inches, I can cover the vast majority of automotive surfaces with the safety of a shorter throw and lower temperature generated by that throw.
Yep.
This, because from a balance perspective, it's coming off center, I have a lot more wiggle room for keeping that pad rotating and doing the work for me than one that might seem a little bit more unbalanced and I could manipulate with the same amount of pressure and potentially create stalls. So this
takes a little more technique.
This takes a little bit more technique, but definitely will accelerate your process. If you're just getting started and you're fearing machines, a dual action random orbital polisher with a shorter throw, this being 9 millimeters versus this being 21 millimeters, is going to be a great tool to get started.
Yeah, Dennis Barrios asked which is smoother, the G15 or the G9. Typically the shorter throw orbitals are going to run a little bit smoother just because there's less motion happening. You're not throwing that pad quite as far. That being said, a 15 or a 21 can still be run smoothly. It's just on average, you're going to get a little less vibration out of a shorter throw tool. We had a viewer ask earlier, I can't recall the handle, but he asked, he sounded like he was doing it professional. He said, what would you guys recommend to get paint corrections done quicker? He said, I want to provide a really good result, but obviously saving time, makes it more profitable and so on.
Time is money when you're detailing for somebody else.
There's definitely a balance because there's some situations, some jobs where you just don't want to rush, and I've had certain paint corrections last 20 hours plus if I'm going for absolute perfection and the customer's paying for that type of hours to be put in. But a long throw orbital, like the G15 or the G21, is a great way to save time. If you're currently using a shorter throw platform, stepping up to a long throw orbital is a great way to speed up your process a little bit while potentially getting an even better result or the same result.
Yeah, again, if you're really interested in our long throw orbitals, I'd encourage you to watch our advanced polishing live. We delve into that. One other thing to think about is that when you're just getting started, we typically recommend also a thicker pad. That creates some conformability, so as you roll over body lines paired with a smaller stroke, you're not going to stall that orbital as much versus a thinner pad and a longer throw, which will, again, create a little bit more technique, a little bit more approach that you need to incorporate. And then likewise, when you get more experience with a shorter throw tool, you can go from a 1-inch thick pad to a thinner pad. And the biggest difference there is this tool has an energy potential, and the foam is absorbing some of that energy that eventually transfers to the paint. With less foam in between the tool and your paint system, you're going to transfer more of that energy down. What does that mean? It means a little bit more temperature, a little bit more aggressive capability, faster results. You can likewise do that with backing plates. So you can modify this tool to grow with your capabilities before requiring more advanced tools. And ultimately, I think that this will always have a place in your arsenal.
Absolutely.
As you get more advanced, in particular for finishing steps on sensitive paints. A longer throw orbital might generate too much temperature for your finishing.
Yeah, or wax application. There's products I would not apply with a long throw tool because they're going to cause problems when it comes to the product curing too quickly and leaving buffer trails or pass lines behind and things like that.
Yeah, so I know plenty of professionals that will use a long throw orbital for the vast majority of their work. The heavy correction, you get to do it fast, great. All they've got is little micro marring and finishing that they want to clarify. They bring out a smaller format or smaller throw tool, a softer pad, and they simply remove the very minor imperfections versus trying to, again, hammer a hanging nail in with a sledgehammer. So there's reason we have 7 tools, and it's to be able to grow with your capability and have an entry-level polisher, but that doesn't mean a professional could not find high levels of utility with this, or even an advanced enthusiast still find a need for this.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning too, it sounds like a couple of you guys maybe, I don't know if we mentioned it already or not, but the pads on these are 5s. So we have 5-inch backing plates and 5.5-inch pads on both the G9 and the G21 right now. These do come stock out of the box. Both of these come with 6-inch plates. G15 comes with a 5-inch plate. If you see a lot of our tools back here, you can probably tell I'm a little biased to the 5.5-inch pad size because most of them have 5-inch plates on them. But.
Yeah, and that's an important thing, right? So these tools come equipped with bigger backing plates. Why would we switch down to a smaller backing plate? There's 2 reasons. One, conformability, right? A smaller backing plate is going to allow you to get into tighter areas. 2, rotational speed and rotational mass. So if you think about like a drag car, they have little 9-inch wheels. They're not, donked out big Hummer SUVs with 24s, but you're talking about the potential power that you're laying down of moving that mass. If you shrink the rotational mass, you can transfer more energy down to the paint and work a little bit more efficiently. So that's a way to immediately upgrade either of your tools, make them even more efficient by shrinking the backing plates.
Yeah.
At some point, each of these tools does have a limitation for the size backing plate that they can accommodate due to the shrouds. And that is where we would get to the concept of a complementary tool for your small spaces or your generally small cars. I would never want to do a entire Suburban with a small format tool. I'd do all my big spaces with this, and then I don't want to do a bumper with 2-inch little sections with a big tool, because all I'm going to do is smack the headlights and the grill. So as you build your tools, and you're building your skill set, the 1-2 punch of the G8, G9, man, they're going to get you into a lot of places. The G9 can accommodate a 6-inch backing plate and a 5. The G8 can go 3, 2, 1-inch backing plates.
Yeah.
So those are great things. And again, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, and I think we'd probably transition on to the next topic that everybody wants to talk about, which is pads. Stevie, have you seen anybody that's sticking out to you with some great questions that needs something free?
Since you guys have already answered a few of them, I think he's definitely a contender for a prize. And then Matt also has been very active in the chat. And he actually asked if you guys would demonstrate stalling so that they can see what that would look like.
Sure.
I saw that one. I wanted to show that.
I'm getting the sense from Matt that if he's asking us to demonstrate stall, he probably is a little bit more advanced. But all right, Stevie, you pick the winners. Dennis Barrio and Matt. Both of you guys are going to win. If you already have tools, like we said, we'll find something else to give you. But if not, you're going to get a G9 2-step polish and wax kit to begin your machine polishing venture. Or we'll hook you up with a complementary tool or pads or compounds of the equivalent value for watching and participating. Thank you, guys. So those are our first 2 giveaway winners. Matt and Dennis Barrio, thank you for your participation. Barrios, excuse me. So let's demonstrate stall, and then we'll talk pads.
Yeah. So I'll do a quick demo with probably one of our most recommended beginner kind of methods or processes, and show you stall during this demo. Gosh, that was a really crooked tape line.
You ever done that before?
Gotta fix that a little bit at least.
Somebody asked how my dad's liking retirement. Well, he's not here. He was here this week.
Good sign.
He's definitely having fun. He's racing more cars. He's doing road trips. He just drove up from LA to Seattle with my grandpa. They bought a Eurovan camper, which, if you don't know the story of my grandfather and my dad spending a lot of time in a Volkswagen camper, they drove from Morocco, that's in Africa, to Cape Town, that's in South Africa. So they literally went from the northern tip of Africa to the southern tip of Africa and lived in a Volkswagen Westfalia in 1971 for an entire year. So any excuse to go buy a Volkswagen camper van and the two of them spend time together, I'd say my dad's enjoying retirement. And the lights are still on, so we haven't messed it up.
It's
great.
A pleasure. Your dad showed me some of the pictures from that trip.
It's wild. They got rammed by a bull elephant.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you could do that today. I think you'd probably have a little bit more problems. Unfortunately, quite a bit more war-torn than it was in the 70s. Not that it was safe either.
So this is our G9 with the 5-inch plate, same one we were just using for the orbital versus long throw, or short throw versus long throw demo. Orange pad, which is going to be one of our easily one of our most commonly recommended, pads for beginners. And then ceramic all-in-one wax. So this is a great kind of middle-of-the-road combination that gets you really respectable results without a ton of effort or risk. So a couple quick tips. I think we briefly touched on these, but always good to again, especially if you're a beginner. Always throw the cord over your shoulder before you're going to polish so it's not dragging against the paint. Put the pad, cord over your shoulder. Put the pad on the paint, as I have it here, before you turn the machine on. If you turn the machine on up here, you'll sling product everywhere.
Attack your loved ones.
Yep, you'll probably only do that once. It's not fun. start with it on the paint, and then I always recommend starting at speed 2 or 3 on the speed dial, spread the product, and then speed up to your main working speed. That will help prevent sling as well. So spread it out over that lower section, and then speed up. I'm gonna work at speed 5. And we'll, normally this type of process, you're gonna do 3 to 5 passes. I'll go ahead and do the full 5 here. So 1 pass, 2 pass. You can see I'm just using really slow arm speed. Again, if you're moving really fast, you're gonna have to do a lot of passes.
Workout, but not really maximizing the utility of the machine.
You want to kind of piece out, let the machine do most of the work. So there's 4 passes. I think that was 4. Talking here.
I can't count.
5. I'll do 1 extra just for good measure in case I skip one there.
And will you show stall as well?
Oh yeah, thank you for the reminder. So stall, so you can see there, that's good pad rotation. It's spinning nice and quick. If I were to, the pad is nice and flat on the surface here. If I were to wedge the pad, you can see there it's just vibrating. So rotation, I go uneven and it stalls out and starts to vibrate. We can show that again with a mark. Grab that.
Yeah, and typically when you're experiencing stall, it's on uneven surfaces, so you're forcing it right now.
Yeah, or if you're not being careful with your technique and.
Well, again, you have too many sodas in the garage. You could get lazy and not realize that you're heeling and towing, which is a term we like to throw around. It obviously has automotive connotations as well, but can we get a lateral shot just so we can kind of show the...
Just real quick. So one thing that will create stall, obviously you want to have the pad perfectly flat. That's another tip to really focus on, because if it's wedged either backwards or forwards, that's when you're going to start getting stall. Unless your surface is angled and you need to toe down or heel down to keep the pad flat along that surface, you want to always keep the pad face as flat as possible to the paint. I always recommend put all your weight over the head of the tool. Don't ever apply pressure with your backhand, with your trigger hand, because that's always going to want to wedge the pad. So always keep your weight straight over the top. You can show it again if you want to go back to the overhead mat. We have I marked a quick line on the pad there, so you'll be able to see the rotation a little better. So nice and, pad's nice and flat, rotating nice and quickly. As soon as I wedge it, it stops rotating. It's just vibrating.
Yeah, the line's
there.
Over here.
Yeah.
And it's not going anywhere.
So back to flat, rotation. You always want that good fast rotation and wedge it forward. You can see there it's just vibrating. It's still orbiting, but it's not spinning at all. You want both going on, so always keep that pad nice and flat.
Yeah. Rachel drives green cars. Rachel Parker, thank you so much. You're always a very informative contributor. You probably should be on payroll at this point, but I generally don't disagree with any of the answers you're giving as we're trying to keep up. We did, again, have another forced rotation question. Mike Phillips, who's definitely a huge detailing guru, I have a lot of respect for him. We've met him many times. He's very complimentary of our products and education. And he loves forced rotation polishers. Why? Because they're efficient.
Yep.
Right? Even with an 8mm throw, you can get results and cut time comparable to a long throw and still have that conformability. We're not disagreeing with it. If you're asking us why we don't sell one, it's the market, right? It is a very, very narrow band of people that prefer that to be their first experience versus the person taking the second step into that. So, at some point, we got to stay in business, and we've sold, in ancient history, we sold, oh my gosh, now I'm going to forget the name. It's a German brand. They make a lot of woodworking tools. Festool. We sold a Festool forced rotation polisher, and in fact it was one of the first tools that I learned on, and what was unique about it was that you could shift from gear driven to free spinning, and so I'd learn on the free spinning. This is with my dad over my shoulder, and then he'd switch to gear driven, and boom, 14-year-old, it'd pull me off the paint. So I don't know what car I was polishing. It was probably my turd of a Mercedes wagon back in the day, but I do recall that experience. That tool, $500. Is that really the what you want to invest in before you know if you even like polishing paint, or that first gear-driven experience? Probably not. And again, we didn't sell a lot of those Festool units.
Yeah.
We sold hundreds of thousands of the Porter Cable free spinning DAs over the years until we designed our own and really left that Porter Cable way far in the dust in terms of capability, power.
And I think too, the majority of the professional market, at least the professionals that I know and have worked with or follow a lot, they would still advocate for a long throw and a rotary being the two primary forms, and then using short throw orbitals for finishing. Sure, a forced rotation might not stall, but poor technique is poor technique. I think in a lot of ways, good technique with a free spinning long throw has a lot of benefits versus good technique with a forced rotation.
Hey, look, it's totally user preference, price of entry, and at this point, RC is going to be trolling us because we're definitely not disparaging them.
No,
it's just a simple matter of economics and what sells and what doesn't. And quite frankly, we have the capability to build forced rotation. Do you want us to invest in forced rotation or the next most innovative thing? Because I'm pretty damn sure I'd rather be focusing on what's going to change the detailing game versus trying to. I think we've seen a couple companies that try to appeal to 1% of their customer base or less, and it's not a great economic strategy. So that's where we'll leave forced rotation at and infer from that what you want. But for us in particular, and the price of our tools and the warranty that we stand behind, you can definitely outmaneuver a single force rotation tool and gain more capability very quickly.
Definitely.
But that's not to say they aren't excellent, and it's not to say that Mike Phillips doesn't know what he's talking about.
No, not at all. They do work well.
Just have to, it's 2023. We have to put 10 sentences of disclosure for one sentence of fact, all right?
Well, there's a reason they're out there. I mean, they do definitely work. We'll go back to, there we go, got the overhead back. So before, that quick one-step demo with ceramic all-in-one and the orange pad, all those swirls before into after. Pretty nice, crisp finish. There are some straight line scratches over here that are deeper than the swirls that were there. Those were probably in this panel prior. But in the bulk of that section, I mean, most people are going to be very happy with the result, before and after like that in a black finish with a single step too. That's
and quite frankly, for me as a teenager, I almost always did one-steps or all-in-one polish. One of our long-term products, one-step sealant. I know we had somebody bemoaning its discontinuation. However, again, we have a vastly superior protection package, a vastly superior abrasive in our ceramic all-in-one wax. If I had that product when I was a teenager, I would have seen my clients a lot less because of how damn durable that is. But it gets you great results with a single step as opposed to a true cutting step complemented by a protection step, whether that's a sprayable protection. And so all-in-ones are great. They're going to be limited in terms of their full correction capability for really heavy stuff, but this is where your time and your expectations of results will dictate where you want to go. And once you get past that, we're in advanced polishing. We're talking about a lot of different things. I think we need to talk about pads and compounds really quick to round this out because we're already at an hour and a half. Really appreciate the participation.
It's always a good one.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are awesome. And like I said, we could do this for 8 hours, and we typically plan for an hour and a half, and our wives are going to be pissed at us because we're going to hang around for a little longer. Okay, so
that happens.
Pads. We talked about tools. We talked about hand versus tools. We talked about dual action random orbital. We did talk about gear driven random orbital. We talked about long throws. We talked about rotaries. So finding the tool you want is important. The next step is pairing that with, again, your expectations, your time, and the process you want to complete. Pads are a very important component to that. on top of abrasives. Now we're careless right now. We're throwing our bottles on this polishing panel. This is a rented mule. We beat the hell out of this thing. So not recommended to put bottles and anything on your painted surface. We're trying to teach you guys stuff. This isn't a priceless Ferrari, okay? So we talked about hand and fillers a little bit, and we talked about abrasive size. We'll get to the liquids in a moment. Let's talk about pads.
Yep.
Because they pair with a lot of what we talked about already. Throw, backing plate size, and let's talk about densities, facings, diameters, and thickness.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So
you guys catch all that? Densities, facings, diameter, thickness. Is there anything else?
No, I think
colors. How cool are their colors?
Colors, yeah. which is an indicator for the density primarily.
But that's actually an important thing because
for sure.
We have deliberately chosen colors. In particular, we have some legacy colors that have always stayed with us, and that is in our standard 1-inch pad size, 1 inch thick, that being.
Yep.
And then with our Boss line, we actually developed the colors to pair with color-coded indicators of, our most ideal pad combination, pad and polish combination. So you can see, we sell car wax. We're not Einstein, but this made pretty damn good sense to us. Black pad, black bar on finishing sealant. These two feel like they're made for each other. Yep. Oh my gosh, yes, there is some correspondence there.
These are guidelines, though.
Guidelines, and that's the great thing. Yeah. We're going to teach you about this because our colors are not going to be the same as some other manufacturers' colors, and in particular, the differences are going to come down to densities and facings.
Yep.
So,
some of the colors will be kind of industry standard, like the 3, 1-inch thick pads that we've offered for a long time. A lot of wax pads you'll see out there are red. Not always, for sure.
Can we get the overhead again, Matt? Because I think we're going to show some things that.
So these are our 1-inch thick pads. These are a great place to start if you're a beginner. These pads give you more conformability to the paint surface. They transfer a little less heat and energy from the orbital, so they're, for lack of a better term, they are safer. I wouldn't quite say like training wheels, but in a way, they can be used at that because they're going to keep your backing plate away from the paint. They run cooler, and you get more conformability. But these 3 colors do tend to be the most popular in red for wax pads, orange for a middle of the road correcting pad, and then black for a finishing pad. You'll see a few other companies out there that have similar colors, but not always. So don't always use that as a rule.
And again, more importantly than color.
Yes.
And we're going to show you. I'm just going to do my very strong fingers here. I've been prying a lot of things out of my 5-month-old's mouth, so definitely have to gain some finger strength. Is density, right? Because as you go to different pad lines and they have different colors, we have to associate density with open cell reticulated foam, which is what these are. These are non-faced open cell reticulated foam. The biggest difference outside of color, which again is unique to Griot's Garage but mirrors some standards, is density. So I'm going to squeeze this with similar pressure. This is what we would consider a medium density foam. Now we want some density for correction and polishing because we're going to impart pressure via the pad itself to drive the abrasive into the paint system and remedy the flaws. Mm-hmm. With something like waxing, the flaws are gone. We're spreading butter over bread at this point. Hopefully it's warm butter, so it's really easy. But the same, very minimal pressure.
Lots of rebound.
Lots of rebound, lots of flex. So we're not imparting a lot of pressure via waxing. So for densities, this is really kind of the key. A firmer pad is going to impart more pressure and friction to the paint. It's going to help you with correction. That's definitely not appropriate once the flaws are gone and you just need to spread wax around. However, as we mentioned, a heavier step with a bigger, more aggressive compound may require that, and then haze and jeweling, you still might want a pad with some density to it to do your polishing because you still have an abrasive in that polish. So this is slightly more dense than the red foam pad. And we would say that this is kind of a jeweling, a very finishing polish. So with all of these too, and as Sam mentioned, the color coding is guideline for us. Mm-hmm. You can take an aggressive polish on a softer, less dense pad and get a middle ground result that is less aggressive than the compound would create on a denser pad. We call this pad flexing. As you gain more experience, you can take our baseline recommendations and change your pads around and get different results. So with open cell reticulated foam, like we have here, density is one of the biggest drivers outside of matching the width of your pad size to the backing plate on the machine. After that, we have facings. So facings are sometimes foam backed. As you can see here, there is a foam interface, but the facing is actually a natural fiber. This is a wool pad. We also have a microfiber pad that, again, depending on the type of tool you use, will create more aggressive results. Why is that? The fibers themselves move and create more friction, and as friction generates heat, and heat benefits the speed of a correction capability, we're going to get a more aggressive result with these pads. Now, the foam detunes their aggression a little bit, but we also have a foam-less microfiber facing. This is going to be an aggressive cutter.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're losing no energy from the tool to the pad, or to the facing, to the paint. This is going to get rid of some heavy stuff for sure. Now, any negatives to these? Yes. As with anything, those same fibers that get rid of the heavy defects can create a haze or micromarring. That may require the balance or secondary step of an open cell reticulated foam that can remedy that very quickly. Typically, if you're doing your heavy cutting, your secondary steps are going to be very mild. In fact, one that we always that we like to use a lot, and I know you do, you practice it quite a bit in customer cars, is you'll approach a car with a fast correcting cream, our most aggressive abrasive, paired with a microfiber pad, get rid of all the deep stuff and accept that we're going to have some light micro marring, but we've gotten rid of all that oxidation, water spotting, heavy concentrated swirl marks. And then my secondary step is with a medium density or low density polishing foam paired with, boom, an all-in-one product, which has a mild polish and a protection step.
Yep.
And now I've taken 3 separate steps, combined them into 2, have a perfect paint finish without deep defects, and I've created my own process based upon, my experience and what my customer wants.
Yeah. Yeah, and the microfiber pads tend to kind of lean towards the side of advanced polishing, but they can still be used. I'd say get your feet under you with a foam pad first, but they can still be used by a beginner or a novice, because in a lot of situations they're still very safe. But like Nick said, you want to keep in mind that you are going to put some haze in the paint with the fiber pads.
Yeah.
Unless you're working on like a metallic or a really light color. Even on a dark metallic, you might see it some. Lighter colors or light colored metallics, sometimes you won't see it, so you could get away with just doing that and not following it, but typically we're going to recommend following it with a foam pad. Wool will also run slightly cooler than the microfiber will. So in a lot of my work that I've done or testing, these are pretty close in their correcting capability between the microfiber and the wool, but the wool will run a little bit cooler. They both will require a pad brush or compressed air. Really all of the pads will, but specifically the fiber pads. As those fibers get matted flat, you're going to have to re-fluff and clean the pad with compressed air or a pad conditioning brush, which we've had lots of questions about cleaning pads.
Definitely, it's going to be something we have to cover on Friday probably.
Yeah.
But it leads to a couple quick answers here. We have a couple questions. Why do some have center holes and some not? As we mentioned, with these lower density foams, you're just doing some very light touching. You're probably not going to generate a lot of heat in those steps.
Yep.
So we're not worried about this pad generating heat. When you're doing correction. When you're working an abrasive in and applying some pressure via the pad, the hottest point of the pad, where most pads fail, is that center point. So it's just a way for air to circulate.
Yeah.
And in fact, you'll see that carried up through the vast majority of our backing plates is a center hole. It just lets the heat out of that center hole. It doesn't, and creates prolonged pad life. So that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, all your liquid and heat will move to the center with that rotation and orbit. So that gives it somewhere to dissipate.
Just like those rides at the fair where they like send you out.
Yep.
Yeah, you're drawn to the center, but you suck back in too. So that's one thing. And then we had a lot of questions about how many pads do I use for a typical car? Can you clean the pads mid-use in the car and extend the life? So typically, what I recommend and what we tend to recommend is on an average size car, it's about 4 to 6 pads per process. So if you're doing a 2-step process and using different pad densities and different abrasives and or products, you're going to need 8 to 12 pads.
Yep.
Why would we say that? Because it's not really super effective to go wash your pad in the middle of your polishing job and then bring a wet pad back and not expect some negative results from that.
Yeah, that would be a bad idea.
And the reason we cycle pads is in the same thing that Sam just mentioned, which is that these things do get heavier. They get loaded up with product. The open cells do get clogged, and they tend to change their performance. Even if you are managing that buildup with a pad conditioning brush or compressed air to remove that, at some point they will get gummed up and be required to be cleaned. These are not single-use pads by any means, but you're not going to want to try and stretch one pad over the entirety of a car.
No.
Just because you've cleaned it after every panel.
And it'll really save you time and also give you better results.
Consistent results
The more
as well.
you're cleaning your pads and the more you're swapping them out. You'll notice that a pad, say you've been using a pad for 2-3 panels, by that third panel, it's going to be taking a little longer to get the same results you were getting under the first panel. You swap that pad out to a new one, you'll do a section and be like, wow, I'm getting those same results again much faster.
Yeah.
So definitely beneficial.
We got a couple specific questions. Ramiro Alba asks, I think this is pertinent, does the pad last less based on the color or paint color you polish? The answer is no, unless it's the difference between single stage paint and clear coated paint.
Yeah.
Typically find that a single stage paint, they're going to be softer, potentially due to age, and the materials that were used when single stage was the rule.
Yep.
And you're going to lift a lot more paint material into the pad, clog it up a lot faster. So it will, and Jeff had just done a single stage red Porsche, and his main complaint was the amount of pads he used and had to clean. I mean, he was doing a section of the car, really old, non-polished car that he was taking to Jeff's level of perfection.
Yeah.
And the paint's just getting into it. On a clear-coated car, you almost never see that same thing.
No.
You never see paint build up unless, again, you're trying to take one pad and do the entirety of the car, which we don't recommend.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'll get a little, but it's mostly the polish residue and things like that, and just the heat that's softening the foam as you go. And to answer the other part of that question, the color of the paint obviously isn't going to matter. The color of the pads, though, if that was what you were meaning, I would say that usually like a perfecting pad, by the time you get to using that pad, you've done a lot of your hard work, so you're not running the tool as fast, you're not using as much pressure. So normally, say I did microfiber as a first step and now I'm using the yellow perfecting pad as a polishing step, I'm going to be able to run those yellow pads longer than what I was running with my microfiber pads or my first step pads, just because a lot of the hard work is done. I'm using a slower speed, not as much pressure, pad's not getting as hot or as beat up. You still want to clean it often though.
Yeah. So we had another question. Again, when we look at our full assortment of Boss pads, there is another difference. Thickness, right? And we kind of touched on this a little earlier. So we have more densities of foam in the Boss line of pads, in particular because we encourage that pad flexing that you guys seem to be chatting about a lot in the comments. And so this is an opportunity with those different densities to combine different compounds and get different results. So somebody asked, when would you use the yellow pad? Well, I might use the yellow pad with a more aggressive compound on a softer paint finish to detune the aggression of that compound via a softer pad. How am I going to know that? Experience, test panels, and finding the ideal result.
Yep.
So the other characteristic of the Boss pads that I want to reiterate is their thickness. So with beginners, we typically recommend the 1-inch thick pads. It gives you conformability. It detunes the energy potential of the machine, giving you more margin for error. If you've got a 5-inch backing plate on a G9 and you're feeling pretty dang comfortable, you can definitely go to a lower profile 5/16 inch thick pad with a Boss pad and get even more aggressive results than a 6-inch backing plate with a 1-inch thick pad. So again, we're talking about lowering the rotational mass with a smaller backing plate, thinning out the pad for more energy transfer to the paint.
Yep.
So that's what we're getting with a thinner pad. We're losing conformability, but as you lose conformability, the assumption is your technique is improved as you get more experience, and now you're wanting speed. That is the key component of a thinner pad. And these tend to pair very well with a long throw orbital.
Yeah.
Which again, its main focus is speed. We're really getting some efficiencies of our process.
Yeah.
With that longer throw combined with a thinner pad, you're going to save a lot of time.
For all you guys asking about pad washing, we have a great YouTube video that explains the full process, but just real quick method on that. Obviously, like we've said, clean them with a pad conditioning brush and or compressed air. After every section that you do, ideally, I recommend doing that every time you pull the pad off the paint to move to a new section. It'll save you time, get you better results, and then once you've put your pad to the side, you have a pile of pads at the end of the detail, soak them in hot water, microfiber and foam pad cleaner, which we sell, you really want, because it's going to make it much easier to get those products out of the pads, the polishes and compounds and waxes or whatever it may be. Soak that pad with microfiber and foam pad cleaner, knead it under hot running water, and then rinse it out. So depending on how loaded it is, you might have to do that a couple times. We had a question, Mr. 44 asked if APC or all-purpose cleaner can be used. I wouldn't recommend using any all-purpose cleaner, but ours is safe to use to help clean your pads. That will help, increase the cutting of it. But typically, in my experience, microfiber and foam pad cleaner is enough, depending on what you got in those pads. But yeah,
and do it sooner than later,
yes,
right? If you let that polish dry and come back a week later, you're going to have a hard time. In particular, I know we had some people ask, how the heck do you get ceramic all-in-one wax out? Again, that polymer that's in there, it's the real deal. It's going to be almost impossible to get out if you wait to clean those pads.
Yeah.
And even so, some of this will always remain in that specific pad. So you want to dedicate a pad to this, but you can get the vast majority of the excess liquid out and it'll still seem like, oh, it's not perfectly clean. Don't worry, those pads are reusable, but it's best to dedicate pads to kind of these all-in-one products that will have protective elements and the heat generated from their polishing process and higher speeds that you use to get the correction capability is just going to bond some of that, those protective elements within the pad.
Yeah, longer soak in hot water and microfiber and foam pad cleaner can definitely help, but yeah, it can be tough to get out of there.
Yeah, we had Jeff something asked, do you have a poster to talk through all these combinations? The answer is yes. On our website, we have a wonderful guide that kind of has recommended pairings of both pads and compounds.
Yep.
We're not going to be able to get to talk about specific compounds. We might want to talk about them categorically in terms of, all-in-ones, true correction.
Yeah, I mean, we touched a little bit on the complete line, complete polish, complete compound. Compound would be your first step, polish would be your second if you need it. Like Nick mentioned earlier, sometimes your second step can be replaced with a good all-in-one. That way you don't have to come back with a protection as a third step. So you can keep it to 2 steps. That's one of my favorite methods to use. And then you have the Boss line, which gets a little bit more complex, and then you have 4 products. But Fast Correcting Cream is going to be your main like compound or cutting type product. Correcting Cream is your middle of the road. That's the one we include in a lot of our kind of basic polishing kits.
Yeah.
Boss Correcting Cream. Very good product. Good defect removal, still finishes down really well, as does Fast Correcting Cream, but you're going to detune that a little bit with Correcting Cream. And then Perfecting Cream is a very nice finishing polish that has, all of them have a very long lubricity and working time, but Perfecting Cream has a little more of an oily nature to it, gets you that perfect finish. And then Finishing Sealant being an all-in-one with a very, very fine abrasive for soft paints and things like that as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to go out on a limb, and even though we thought he was getting to the point where he might be trolling us, RC has continued to fire away some great questions, awesome in particular making us talk about gear driven. So RC, you're going to be our probably last giveaway winner for today, so really appreciate your participation. No harm, no foul related to us. We gave you honest answers related to your perspective on gear-driven orbitals. Hopefully, if you already have a set of orbitals, we can set you up with some other kit from us that will take your polishing to the next level. I would say that the biggest thing that I want to also reiterate, we're nearly 2 hours in here. Right? So if you're confused as to where to start, I want to make it really crystal clear. The tool we sell the most of and gives the very best experience from the start in terms of your capability of doing the most amount of your car possible before you need a complementary tool is going to be our G9 Random Orbital Polisher. Pair that with an orange foam correcting pad, which is a medium density foam, and a medium grade correcting cream, or a product such as ceramic all-in-one wax. In those combinations, that is pretty much the best entryway into machine polishing, where you really would have a hard time doing harm, and 2, it'll open up your eyes to the potential of a mild approach with machine polishing and how much it can improve your paint. And then you're in the wormhole with us, and we've got another 2 hours to talk about advanced polishing. So if you're still wondering, orange pads, G9, and either ceramic all-in-one wax or correcting cream, we have many kits that feature either of those.
Both.
But yeah, that would be a great 1-2 punch because you'll have no protection left over when you use correcting cream. Or I think you'll be shocked by the correction capability of ceramic all-in-one, as we showed you on this panel here, and the ease of doing that and getting a great result before you realize, hey, I want to do more. Okay, well, the next time you polish after that, protection, the ceramic all-in-one wears off, which could be a while. You can add a complement to that. So let's just say this, that's the great starting point. There's so much to this, guys. We could spend hours and hours talking about machine polishing. It really is something I enjoy doing. It's something that once you do it and gain the confidence of using a tool and realizing how easy it is to get great results, sure, there's a whole world out there. And that's why we have 7 tools, right? I mean, could we have 8, 9, and 10? Probably, right? And maybe we will. No teasers. But I do want to wrap this up. We gotta mention, if you guys have been inspired and are excited to go clean your cars, we do have our liquid car care sale going on right now. It's starting early for everybody who is watching this with us live. 20% off all liquid car care at griotsgarage.com using the key code SMLDH. Our next SEMA, or our next live event, will actually be live from the SEMA floor. So we have done that year over year. SEMA, if you don't know yet, is one of the largest automotive aftermarket trade shows in the world. We have been a member of SEMA and participating in that for very many years. We've been displaying as a manufacturer since 2015. Fortunately for you and me, we don't get to enjoy Vegas at all.
Yeah.
We don't get to see any of the cars. We go work.
We've done plenty of that.
But Sam and the PD team, which I dabble in nowadays.
Yeah, you still hang out.
Has been working very hard with a lot of amazing new products. We're really excited to show you guys. So that Tuesday, is it November 1st, guys?
I think so.
I mean, it might as well be January.
31st. I think it's Halloween.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, we're going to ask you guys to join us on Halloween, okay?
It's Halloween morning, not Halloween night.
We'll be, you will see it. Those are generally pretty brief, right? We kind of introduce all of our products, tell you what's going on at the show, and then 2 weeks after that, we generally come back and demonstrate all the products. So get excited for that one. You definitely don't want to miss it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Subscribe to Instagram, or follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram will definitely
Whatever
have
you call it.
specific features on all of the new products that we're going to be launching at that time. Facebook is another great one. And yeah, I think we're going to have our hands full answering all these questions for No Questions Left Behind.
Yep.
And if you didn't get your question answered, you didn't win something, I think we've got we're in like 4 pages of questions we didn't address. So
you guys are awesome.
You will see us on Friday. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you're inspired to go buy something. Take advantage of that 20% off. And we'll see you on Halloween from the SEMA floor for our next live event.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Have fun in your garage.
Get out there, have fun in your garage.